much of that came by way of not having the funding to get it done. So getting beyond the funding, the other issue that we deal with, of course, is your permitting, your planning, and all your environmental things that you have to go through. So any kind of acceleration of that process, and I think the DOT has a process by which you can accelerate, where they actually finance the federal agency review process in terms of some of those major projects to get it done. So I think that there has to be a collective decision that we want to invest in our infrastructure. And then it's just a decision of being made that this is what we're going to do, this is the timeline we're going to get it done. This particular project is important to this area, to this region, and we're going to get it done within the next 5 years or 10 years, rather than bump along and nickel and dime this stuff. That's what I say.
I'm going to swap to the other end for a minute. I'm going to ask Clarence to see what he thinks.
Well, we have a pretty definitive view on it. When the administration came out a few years ago with the stimulus package and said, if you got a shovel-ready project, you need to bring it up and bring it forward. Our engineers almost laughed themselves out of the room. With a shovel-ready project, you got to have financing, you've got to have a plan in place to do it. More than likely, you're going to have your contracts lit, you're going to have the environmental permits that's in place to make this shovel-ready. And I know many of you that's in this conference today are contractors, so you have a very clear point of view about what I'm saying here. So we think that one of the things you got to do is the government's got to have consistent and clear policies, and they got to maintain those policies. And to Governor Rendell's credit, he was one of the 4 states, I guess it was 4, that was rated as the best in the country in the stimulus package. And that was a result of his leadership. He got all the people in a room. He was telling this story here last night to a group of us, and that were the contractors and the people that were complaining about how long it took to get something done, and all the bureaucrats in here. And he said, we're going to do this in 60 days. So you're going to get your RFPs in 30 days, and you're going to respond to those in 30 days. We're going to have an audit place and plan. Within 60 days, we're going to start construction on our stimulus money. And I guess it was 90 days the state started it. And that's the type of leadership it's going to take, and the streamlining it's going to take if you're going to get projects done. I'll give you a good example happening to us right now. This National Gateway project that we're working on, which we will connect from the ports of Wilmington to Chicago, Illinois, going across Washington, Baltimore, and Pittsburgh. We're taking a rail line that was essentially built in 1827 through 29 out of Baltimore, and then later added to in the 1830s in the north-south line. And it was built for steam locomotives, and all we're building it and clearing it for double-stack trains to be able to go in. In fact, by the end of 2012, we will be cleared all the way from Chicago to a place called Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, which we located a new intermodal facility in Chambersburg about 3 or 4 years ago with the help of the local community, Congressman Schuster, and Governor Rendell. It was a greenfield facility. It was out in the middle of nowhere. It had good access to the interstate systems. Within a matter of time, Home Depot had located there. The Target stores had located there. Distribution centers were moving in. Land cost was relatively inexpensively. We had to complete this project on around to clear Virginia Avenue Tunnel. Virginia Avenue Tunnel was built in 1901. Built literally in Virginia Avenue. Part of it is less than 100 yards from the United States Capitol. 5 sitting U.S. senators live in several blocks of this. You come off of the Acosta River and you're ready to go through downtown Virginia. It's a brick-lined tunnel. For those of you that can't appreciate that, that was a common construction used in this country in the late 1800s. Now, you go in that tunnel today and pull a brick out of it, you better be moving pretty fast. It's coming down, and it's a choke point in the north-south traffic of the United States. So if you're on a commuter train, if you're on an Amtrak train, and you're trying to go to work from Richmond, Virginia to Washington, D.C., you got to go through that tunnel at 10 miles an hour. Our engineers have come in, and at our own expense, we asked for government assistance, and as the governor pointed out, we were turned down. We're going to have to put, our shareholders are going to have to $175 million into that tunnel. And that's going to take a while, because when you go to build a tunnel, you have to build another tunnel explained what we were going to do to the community. We also had artist renditions of when we get through with this thing, it's going to be a lot better than what you see now. We're going to build shopping plazas, malls, pedestrian malls on top of it, parks and all around it for baseball, softball, dog walks, things like that to do. And as a result of us being very proactive in that, we were able to go through an environmental impact study that's called ERISA that takes this long as opposed to 2 or 3 years to do. But that took a lot of work, that took a lot of explaining, and had we not had the city council in D.C., had we not had the governor in Virginia, if we had not had the governor in Maryland, and to his credit, Secretary LaHood, and a whole group of interested constituencies in there, it would have taken us 3 to 5 years to get a permit, and another 3 years or 4 years to build that tunnel. And that's assuming we got that permit. We could have easily been turned down. So those are the type of issues and policies that our country is going to have to address. Final point. The governor talked about that port of Shanghai. Remember that? Well, I went to that port right after that port was built. It was right after Hurricane Katrina. The Chinese went out 22 miles off the coast, took a rock, and essentially cut it in half. Made the fill material. They built a divided interstate highway 22 miles out there. It took them 2 years. Now we, CSX, was just in that process at that time of rebuilding our bridges for Hurricane Katrina. So I had some pretty good idea of how many barges and cranes it took to do that. And it was over 200. And they built it in 2 years. You know how long that would have taken to build in the United States? We would have never got it built, more than likely. And the cost would have been so prohibitive to do that. When we hear people talk about we want high-speed rail in this country, can you imagine what our Chinese cost for high-speed rail is $20 million a mile. They don't have land costs, they don't have labor costs. I mean, over there, it's a lot different. Let's go build a rail. Where do you want to do it? Right through that guy's house. And it doesn't work that way in this country. And I'm glad it doesn't work that way in this country. Don't get me wrong. But let's be sure that we understand the comparisons that we're making here as a country and the trade-offs that we got to make. And are you prepared as a citizen to do it?
Well, I know there's an issue that you and I have been working on. I know you want to talk about that.
And it's interesting to hear it's not just Clarence with CSX, and they're the best in the business at doing what they do. They are branding their companies, their company, and the rail companies, maybe the best in the United States now. That they're a model that we should follow. We should also have follow models of best practices that other states have incorporated to complete projects on short time frames, such as Governor Rendell did in Pennsylvania on that project. It can be done. You will all remember that when the Minneapolis Bridge collapsed about 5 years ago, that was a critical link between 2 major American cities. You can imagine the inconvenience. It would be the equivalent of every bridge crossing the river here in Jacksonville going down. What would we do? And could we wait 5 years or 6 years to go through the normal permitting process and the multi-layered local, state, federal? And they didn't in that case. They all got together. They came together, the state, the federal, and the local government. They built it in 528 days, which was phenomenal considering that it would normally take more than 5 years because it was critical, it was urgent. As the governor said, we used to be risk takers in this country. Let me give you Clarence outlined Shanghai. We joke in the port industry, the longest amount of time it takes the Chinese to build a port, once they decide where it's going to be, is to get the heavy equipment there. That's the longest amount of time. Here closer to home, a third world country, Panama, decided in 2003 that they saw shifting trade trends in the globe decided to invest $5.5 billion. They had to have a national referendum. Can you imagine that? A national referendum. We just spent $872 billion in a stimulus package. And less than $1 billion of that went into America's gateway infrastructure, by the way. We have a $40 million project. They're going to be done with the Panama Canal sometime. They're going to have a ribbon cutting, let's put it that way, in 2014, because that's the 100th anniversary of the Panama Canal. I've been down there twice in the last 8 months. Met with the president, I went with our governor, met with the head of the Panama Canal Authority. By the way, you should see their ports they're building down there. That's who we're competing with. Transshipment ports, not just widening the canal, investing in significant infrastructure. At the same time, Jacksonville had a small little navigational hazard. Many of you may have heard it. Mile Point was identified in 1999, started work in 2003 through our federal broken process. We may finish that project, $40 million project, in 2014, if everything goes according to the plan now. So here we are, the greatest country in the world, $40 million project. It's going to take us the same amount of time that Panama is building the largest project in the world. Something is broken, and we need to fix that. We need to employ best practices. We need leaders like Governor Rendell. We need leaders, again, that are willing to step up and say, what is wrong with this process? The trust funds is another issue. I think they should be called just kidding funds. Congress is just kidding when they create another trust fund. You didn't mention, you mentioned the Highway Trust Fund, the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund. You didn't mention the Social Security Trust Fund. All being used to offset runaway spending, deficit spending. So,
And if I may just make a brief comment, that during the last legislative session, we were prepared to fund Mile Point, and after a lot of discussion with the Port Authority, we were unable to fund it. We were in a position that we could have funded it, but funding it would have done no good because it would not have been able to have been completed to fix Mile Point.
we're going to need an act of Congress, literally, so that the state of Florida can advance money for the federal government so that we can spend our dollars to finish this project. And that might not happen for another year or two.
Steve?
Well, let me start with the good news. I think, in my opinion, the state of Florida has the #1 airport support program in the country. That program provides funds to airports to not only build infrastructure, but build economic development projects. And that is paid for by fees and taxes that users of the aviation system pay into it. And we have a great partnership with FDOT, with Space Florida, with Enterprise Florida, to ensure that those monies come to Jacksonville and are used to assist both our infrastructure and economic development. If you look at the federal level, on average, in this country, it takes just about 20 years to build a new runway. That is totally unacceptable. The track record of the federal government in creating our new national airspace system, NextGen, atrocious. It is just virtually impossible to get infrastructure built the way we have done it and the way it has evolved over the last 20 to 30 years. And so really, I think everybody has said it's how do we cut through the process. Building it's the easy part, and it takes the least amount of time. It is getting through the process that is killing us, because by the time next gen is built, it'll be old gen, and we'll be 5 generations behind whatever the rest of the world is using. It is scary to think that it's only in the last 10 years that the last vacuum tube was taken out of the air traffic control system. And for those of you not old enough to remember vacuum tubes, you don't want to know. And so somehow we've got to figure out how to streamline these processes, make them less political, less subject to the political needs of it on a more objective level.
If I could just make one quick comment to that